Good morning, everybody. I apologize. My back is to some of you. And I apologize for that. Good morning and welcome to the April 28th Rotary, Williston-Richmond Rotary Club meeting. Today we're meeting in the Williston Central School community room and enjoying a very delicious breakfast. So to Scott Wagner and his staff, thank you very much. Next week we will be back at Fellowship Hall at the Williston Federated Church and full Zoom as we have been for a while. So for those of you who are not familiar with our meetings, and there are probably only a few of you, we generally start our meetings at 7:30 and we start with an inspiration from one of our members. And that's followed by a tidbit of information about Rotary that we call a Rotary cog by another member. And then we either have a business meeting or we have a speaker. Today we are fortunate enough to have a speaker. So we will get to our speaker in just a minute. We're going to start with our inspiration from the principal of the Williston Central School and one of our members, Greg Marino.
Thank you, Leslie. It's great to have the meeting here. Feel the host. I want to welcome everybody. My inspiration is an experience that I had yesterday. I'm very fortunate to do work that is both humbling and challenging and inspiring every single day. And we had a very challenging situation with a student, and the inspiration part is the watching a number of people, 10 to 12 people, drop what they're doing, circle up on a moment's notice, pool their skills, their knowledge, their compassion, their care for a student and a family in a very tough spot in the midst of their regular routine, and watch how that all comes together in a way that was just what was needed for that moment. And it was just one of those moments where you're looking around the room and you're watching people do their thing without any kind of idea that this was going to happen 2 hours ago in their lives. And it's just an inspiring thing. So that's my inspiration. It's about partnership and teaming and focusing on what the need is at a particular moment. I'm also inspired by the fact that we're all together. It's great to be back here. I hope to be more of a regular presence at Rotary going forward. Feels like things are starting to finally, we're looking forward to doing. We're more in planning mode now, where how are we going to make our graduation extra special? How are we going to welcome our kindergartners, our third graders back next year in a way that feels really amazing? Not in a pandemic way, but in a way that just feels great. Not that the pandemic is gone, and we don't have those concerns, but just we've turned a corner in terms of our mindset. So thanks for being here, everybody. That's my inspiration.
Thank you, Greg. It certainly does take a village. I'm very inspired. And for our Rotary cog today, we have Ted Kenny.
Morning, everybody.
Morning, Ted.
Before I do the cog, I just want to say I used to be in this room when I was on the school board, Williston School Board. I'm getting a little PTSD. Between being on the school board, the planning commission, or the select board, the school board is far worse than any of the others. Anyway, so I given the circumstances in the world and even in our own country, I chose a piece of Rotary information that goes into history. Rotary in World War II. In Europe, Rotary records in World War II. Rotary records were seized by the Gestapo. Rotarians were imprisoned, and in Warsaw, 12 members of the local Rotary clubs were taken from a meeting and summarily executed. Some Rotary clubs burned every record membership. And only once since 1905 did Rotary International clarify its position with regard to political movements, and that was in 1940 in reaction to the onset of World War II. Quote, where freedom, justice, truth, sanctity of the pledged word, and respect for human rights do not exist, Rotary cannot live, nor its ideals survive. So I wanted to share that with people. Again, as a message from history. Rotary is about freedom, justice, truth, respect for human rights. More important to remember that now than perhaps in just a couple of years. Thank you.
And our speaker chair for the month of April, I think it's the last speaker chair role, is Eric Wells. So I'll let you introduce our speaker today.
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce Ted Brady, our speaker today. Ted Brady is the Executive Director of the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. VLCT is a statewide nonprofit, nonpartisan organization founded in 1967 with a mission of serving and strengthening Vermont local government. All 246 cities and towns, another 142 units of local government, like villages and water districts, are currently members of VLCT. VLCT offers support, knowledge, representation, insurance, and connection to its members. Brady served as Deputy Secretary of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development in the Scott administration. During his 4 years with the agency, he assisted with the pandemic response and recovery, administered state and federal technical assistance, tax credit and grants programs, championed outdoor recreation expansion, and worked to make Vermont a great place to live, work, and play. Previously, Brady was appointed by President Obama as Vermont New Hampshire State Director of the USDA Rural Development, where he oversaw the administration of over $1 billion in housing, business, community development loans, and grants. Brady spent more than a decade working as a community and economic development liaison for U.S. Senator Patrick Leahy's office, both in Washington, D.C. and in Vermont. Ted lives right here in Williston with his wife, Erin, one of our state representatives, and their 2 children. He serves on the boards of the Vermont Council on Rural Development, Preservation Trust Vermont, and the Champlain Valley Expedition. He spends his free time musing around the future of Vermont, full of fishing, skiing, and enjoying the Green Mountains. My pleasure to introduce Ted Brady.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you, Greg, for hosting us today. I have to be honest, when I hear your voice, I have chills down my back. So after the last 2 years, you can call me and tell my kid's been exposed to COVID. So, or yesterday telling me I don't have a bus to get my kid on. So Greg's voice is the voice of doom. Yeah, I look forward to your voice being the voice of happiness. I mean, Greg's voicemails, I'm sure anybody who has kids here, since Greg's been in the schools, you get that message 2 days, 3 days before school where Greg gets you all pumped up to come back to school. I miss those days of Greg. I'm sure you do too. Eric left out, I think, the most important thing, which is I graduated from the greatest college in Colchester, Vermont. Which is St. Mike's. Eric's an alum and Ted's an alum. Any other St. Mike's alums? Come on, not enough. Trinity, that's close. Hey, I think I visited Trinity when it still existed when I was at St. Mike's. Yeah, so that's a sister school. But I'm going to give you hopefully a quick TED Talk. And we'll see how it goes. Because I'm going to be honest, it's the first time I've ever been to a Rotary meeting, which is kind of nice. I'll try to make it a habit. It's also the first time I've spoken to an in-person group. I think since last summer, right? Since we had since COVID reduced. So I'm going to try to share my screen. I'm an image guy, so I hope that, let's see if I can do this. I can share some images. All right, so it's going to take a moment to catch up. So I like to tell people when I tell them, then tell them, and then finish by telling you what I've told you. And so I'm just really, all I'm here to tell you is all politics are local. You've heard that line before. Tip O'Neill is widely credited with it. Tip O'Neill, former Speaker of the House for, I think he may still be the longest serving Speaker of the House during Carter and Reagan. He was from Massachusetts. And, he attributes that line to the fact that you can't really get reelected unless you're, thinking about home all the time, thinking about the little stuff, thinking about pocketbook issues at home. I picked this picture of Tip because you can search Tip O'Neill and find just about 10,000 giant gin blossoms from a Massachusetts white man with white hair. But I just loved him sitting next to Norm when he was on Cheers. I'm not sure if you remember that, but he turned Cheers around, and he claimed to have turned Cheers around. Before he went on Cheers, they were thinking about canceling the show. Afterwards, they went up to like #1 and #2. So what do I mean by, well, so why am I going to say all politics are local? Because as Eric stole most of what I was going to talk about, which is my past, I have had the experience of working at the federal level, working at the state level, and choosing to come work at the local level because I think the local level is where it's at, and because I think all politics are local. I think politics has been stolen, right? People think politics, and let's keep the politics out of this. Well, I call BS, because politics are not like Debbie and Don Turner fighting in the State House about a political R&D issue. Politics are simply governance. That's what politics are. It is the act that Ted and Rick and Eric are involved in every day. It's the act that Greg's involved in every day, and many of you are involved in organizing, running your business, running your nonprofit, and of course, running your government. So that concept of the total complex of relations between people living in society, that's what politics are. And when I say all politics are local, that means everything that happens outside of your local community, it's barely touching this in my mind. It's not about getting reelected. It's about it all happens at that extremely local level. Bill Grover, so I went to St. Mike's, Bill Grover, Williston. Bill's still in Williston. I haven't seen him in years. Political science professor at St. Mike's. First day in intro to poli-sci, he has me or all the other students do a project about, pick something that's political. And somebody in my class picked whether or not the cafeteria served mashed potatoes. And it's totally legit. There was some governing body that said, what are we going to serve for lunch today? Let's make the menu. Does it have the calories? So God bless Bill Grover. So I once had hair.
Oh.
Yeah. And so I share these pictures because there's actually a story to it. I started out my life in Rhode Island, and I started out, my first job was washing dishes and then as a cabana boy at a beach club, which was really interesting and fun and dynamic. And however, it was filled with drama. I got beaten up by some thugs. A man named Tony Mazzillo came to me and said, "Do you want me to take care of these boys for you?" Went out to his car, it was filled with guns. 2 weeks later, I come back and I was asked to clean up a murder scene. Not kidding. So it was a rather interesting first job. So this is me quickly quitting that job on the left and going to work for the Narragansett Police Department, which is my first job in local government. So see, it all does come back to all politics are local. And my job was to actually file fingerprint cards. Interesting story about a month after I left my first job for Narragansett Police Department, the captain of the police department called me and said, "I just want to let you know the FBI returned all your fingerprint cards because you did the job wrong." That was 2 months of my life that was wasted. And I should also point out that I got stuck behind that desk like an old cop movie because I was fired from the original job, which was community service officers got the great privilege of walking around town. I grew up in a beach community and writing parking tickets. That's what they had the high school kids do, right? And I got fired because they had the horrible idea of letting these high school kids drive the police cars, like to and from their job. So I was an 18-year-old kid who just cleaned up a murder scene after being beaten up and offered to have somebody killed, driving a police car. And of course, what does a kid like that do? You fiddle with the buttons. And so I was assigned to desk duty after the town manager saw me leave the town office with the lights on and said, "I don't think you're supposed to do that." So I did what any good 18-year-old kid would do. I found a place where they didn't do quite as much vetting, and I found a way to drive ambulances with St. Mike's Fire and Rescue, where I could still drive with the lights on and sirens on without such an extensive background. And so I've been in this room, like Ted just mentioned he has. First time I was ever in the room was probably 1998, teaching a CPR class to a bunch of folks here in this room when I was at St. Mike's Rescue. I tried to find pictures and actually went through the old collection of the Williston Observers and the whistles at the library to try to find a picture of me walking the 4th of July parade that year. No luck. Anyways, has nothing to do with why I'm here. So that was fun. So I had hair until I went into politics. And I want to be clear, I've never thought of myself in politics, Democrat versus Republican. except when like I'm, volunteering on campaigns and stuff in my past life. But I went to politics first down in Washington, D.C., and I worked for Senator Pat Leahy for 6 years down there and another 7 or 8 up here in Vermont. And that was an incredible story, incredible part of my experience to understand federal government. And I'll get to that in a second. Because guess what I learned when I was in federal government? All politics are local. Thanks for filling in my sentence. So after that, I stayed in the federal government, worked for this organization, USDA Rural Development. Their claim to fame is housing. They make housing loans to low-income people. They make grants to low-income people to replace boilers, you name it, furnaces. An incredible experience. $1 billion in my 3.5 years. This is me at a homeownership event celebrating this guy who bought a new house using a USDA product. Incredible thing. What I learned in my time in the federal government is, what the federal government is really good at? Taking your money and giving it away. And that's important because that comes back to the end of my conversation. But I also learned during all this time, everything I did at USDA Rural Development, whether it was helping to build wastewater treatment plants, whether it was helping to fix libraries, all politics are local because it takes local people to do the projects and ask for money. So then I had this great opportunity to go work for Governor Scott at the Agency of Commerce and Development. This is me at a downtown tax credit. If you don't know about the downtown tax credit program, it's an incredible thing that has revitalized and created housing and businesses all over the state of Vermont, about $2.5 million a year. Private developers can access this, private land. It's a wonderful program. What I learned when I was at the state of Vermont was that really what the state does best, though we all think they take a lot of our money, when you file your income taxes, you'll notice you don't actually give the state a lot of money compared to the feds, right? The state owns policy. And so that was one of my takeaways. But still, with all that policy, all politics are local. So then I find myself here at the Vermont League of Cities and Towns working with Rick McGuire, at the league. And Eric explained what the league is, but just a quick refresher. We represent the towns and cities. We help towns, cities, and villages get stronger. We give them tools. We represent them in the legislature and Congress, and we give them insurance. So that's my wild journey. And so going back to that federal thing, the federal government, I like to say it's all show because it's where, it's the big dance. It's the NCAA tournament. It's Hollywood for geeks. And we all focus so much time fretting about it, fighting about presidential politics, congressional politics. But I have to tell you, I have what I call the quintessential Washington, D.C. story from my time. So I'm a young kid, probably 23, 22 years old, trying to think of the time, sometime around there. I'm working down in D.C. Answering mail for Senator Leahy. So like a kid writes and says, how many senators are there in Congress? And we actually had to write a letter and give it to the senator to sign. Unfortunately, I once sent a letter to a kid from a school and told them there were 50 United States senators, and it got to the senator who signed it. That letter came back from the principal of that school saying, what the hell is going on in your office? Well, one of the letters I received was from this girl up in Canaan, Vermont. And she literally handwritten letter. She's a 4th grader. And she writes to us and says, dear Senator Leahy, I've raised $500 to buy a bulletproof vest for a Border Patrol dog in Canaan. Now, this is a weird letter, right? Because then it goes on to say, the officer's name is Dave Perry, the dog's name is Mick. Dave Perry, who, by the way, I served in St. Mike's Fire and Rescue with his son. What's his first name? Anyways, Perry, called him Sergeant Perry because he was in the military in the end. And I'm like, so he caught me, right? So I bring it to the senator and say, we have to do something about this. So, let's see, I don't know how to use the animations. So the Caledonia Record writes about this for like a year, like writing editorials about how Senator Leahy's going to try to help this girl give this dog this bulletproof vest. Because the Department of Homeland Security has said, well, the dog is technically an officer. And guess what? Officers aren't allowed to accept gifts. So this dog legally cannot accept a bulletproof vest. This kid has raised $500 to buy. So we go about this process, which is the political process of governing, to try to get just a simple line that says dogs can accept gifts. And it takes us about a year, and the Caledonia Record writes all these things. Well, sure enough, this article on the right, we finally succeed, right? And we slip this language, Senator Leahy slips language into the bill that funded the Iraqi war to allow this girl to give this dog a bulletproof vest. And it was like such an exciting moment. And it took us a year to get this done. I'm sorry to use the language, Greg, I shit you not, but then this happens. The dog dies.
Oh.
It wasn't shot. That would be the ultimate in Ireland. The dog dies before this girl can give the dog a bulletproof vest. And so I, as the staffer that kind of organized all this, say, I think we should still go there and celebrate this and bring the girl in and talk to her and say, this is, welcome to government. Like, you just learned to really, and so he goes up there and does this whole thing, changes the law, and she still gives the vest to a new dog. It's a nice ending. But I think it tells you everything that's wrong with the federal government, right? It's slow. It's not where you go to get things done. I want to go back to what I said before. It's where you go to get money. It's also where you go to bask in the glory of Hollywood geekdom, right? And so for my 13 years, I had a lot of great opportunities to meet a lot of the people in DC. This is what I really think DC is. You get to hobnob with bigwigs and pretend like you're doing something. And so the top one is my crowning moment of glory where I got to meet Bono. Bono's the guy in the blue glasses, in case you could figure that out. Where he came in and introduced himself to me, and I said, I'm Ted Brady, nice to meet you, Mr. Bono. I don't know what you say to him. He goes, oh, Brady, it's a good Irish name. Well, that was my interaction with celebrities. What my real geekdom was, the top right picture is me with the Car Talk guys. This is the only picture I have. Click and clack, Tom and Ray. They take the camera, like their assistant takes the camera, and they all get on their knees to take a picture to make fun of how tall I am. And they laugh hysterically, like you can see him laugh. Doug Berman in the background too. And I got to meet the Cookie Monster and all that. So anyways, the moral of that story is you really just get to play in DC. It's not where the real stuff gets done. So then I come to state government. And I have to be honest, I was nervous about coming to state government because everybody I've ever known in state government works twice as hard as anybody that I've experienced in government. Like I watch people go through Irene. I watch people give up their lives for 120-hour weeks, 100-hour weeks.
Good morning. Put your reminder time. Today's hot meal is pizza with Caesar salad. Today's home meals is chef salad. All meals include a frozen dessert. Thanks and have a great day.
Sounds good. You did a great job. So in state service, what I observe is the tremendous amount of policy work that happens. And so at the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, we worried about economic development, right? And I just want to point out, so when I say policy work, this top right picture of the people sitting at a table shaking hands, that's your Senator Michael Sorokin on the left, and that's a former representative on the right, Bill Botso in the middle, shaking hands over the first conference committee I ever, the Economic Development Bill Conference Committee in the State House I worked on. And this one, we expanded the TIF program. Thank you, Senator Ingram, for that help. We expanded the downtown tax credit program. We created the remote worker program, which you may have heard of, recruiting people to come move to Vermont. It was a big day. That bill had less than like $2 million. And we spent 4 months working on that bill. And I sit there and reflect, and I say that thing is about, like, state government's about policy. You work your butt off to make policy that potentially changes lives. And they're doing down in Montpelier right now. And my wife is doing down in Montpelier right now. And the bottom left picture is in the State House, just the floor during a governor's budget address. It's a joke, right? A $6 million or $8 billion budget this year. That's 2/3 to a half of it this year. More than half of it is federal money. The state doesn't do money. The state does policy. That's the whole point of this story. My other point about how much more nimble state government is, so the pandemic hits, and this picture on the bottom right of me on TV, isn't that funny? You're watching me on TV, is from COVID. So about March 20th, 2020, I get a phone call from Jason Gibbs. And he says, so we have a little problem. I say, what's the problem? He goes, we need to shut down the government. We don't know who would do it. And I say, I think you've called the wrong person, because at the Agency of Commerce, we administer grants and loans. And, and talk about economic development, and promote economic development as well. As of tomorrow, you're in charge of saying which sectors can stay open and have to close. And within 24 hours, we stood up a web forum to say, send us your questions, comments about the executive order. I go to sleep at 11:30. I wake up at 6 a.m. and there's 5,000 emails in this web forum asking if people can stay open. And quickly, a group of about 50 to 100 state employees from everything from the Department of Transportation to the Department of Financial Regulation to ACCD come together, to the Department of Health, obviously. And we put a team together to answer these 5,000 emails and the 5,000 more that would come in. And over the next 2 years, little did we know at that time, the 10,000 more inquiries that would come in about how you safely reopen. And it was this incredible opportunity to show how nimble state government can be. And so the state government is a place of policy and much more nimble. There's no bulletproof vest waiting a year for a dog, no dog waiting a year for a bulletproof vest when it comes to state government. I like the middle picture because let's be honest, I'm Ted Brady, and to sit next to Tom Brady's Super Bowl trophy. And I like the top left picture because that's like my look of what the hell did the governor just commit me to do? Like you'll see that look often if you look through my pictures. So then I come to the Vermont League of Cities and Towns because I'm almost done, I promise. Because all politics are local. Eric explained what we are. We just did a recent survey of our membership, and so we have about 6,000 member contacts. And we did a survey to say these are select board members, these are planning commission members, town managers, administrators, God knows what else. And we said, what are the top issues facing your municipality? Housing affordability, aging infrastructure, attracting and retaining staff, declining workforce, IT, and cybersecurity. All things that no municipality can handle on their own, right? However, my central premise is all politics are local. And so let's take that housing thing for just one moment. I want to just share an observation about how local government and local action can either solve a problem or create a problem. And obviously this is Finney Crossing, which any select board member, DRB member, or concerned citizen in Vermont, or planning commission member over the last 20 years has probably had nightmares, heart attacks over all of task corners. But I think it's this incredible example of how federal, state, and local government work together, to provide resources to make policy, and then ask us, local government, to do something about it. Williston made a decision to become a growth center, right? To focus our growth at Taft's Corners. They only did that because the state created a policy that allowed them to do that. And they were only able to do that because some of this housing has been supported by state and federal funding, right? To tax credits, low-income housing tax credits, go down a long list of federal pieces of funding. But ultimately, none of this could have happened if I went on a bike ride down the Cape last weekend with the Boy Scouts with Jake Mathon, thank you. And he was telling me about how he was on the planning commission when the growth center was happening. And it's like, that guy gave time as a citizen member of the planning commission, and he's to thank for how many housing units have we built in Williston in the last 10 years? 1,000? 1,500? Whatever Finney Crossing plus Cottonwood now, plus the senior living over in Taft's Corners, like all of these things are addressing that issue that our members say is the #1 issue, but they couldn't do it without that federal, state, and local partnership. Because all politics are local. And these are hard decisions that can sometimes decay civil discourse at the local level, right? And I'm not sure if anybody has been watching a Twitter battle down in Montpelier right now about this place called Sabin Pasture. That community for decades has wanted to build a couple hundred housing units out in Sabin Pasture. It's adjacent to downtown. And it's a hostile, nasty fight between the NIMBYs and the YIMBYs. And ultimately, if the top issue you have is housing, local officials and local citizens need to step forward and plan for it and execute it. And as my friend Paul Costello, who used to be the director of the Vermont Council on Rural Development, say, the federal government's not coming to help you. The state government is not coming to help you. And if you're lucky, your local government is, but most likely you're going to have to go tell them that you need their help. I only have 2 more slides, I think. So I just mentioned the Vermont Council on Rural Development. I want to give two examples of really effective local politics working. And so the Vermont Council on Rural Development was created in the 90s by actually George W. Bush. They created these rural policy councils across the entire country. Today, there's only about 20 that are left because, well, at some point, guess what the federal government did? They stopped funding these things. And some of them, like ours here in Vermont, have managed to survive because of grassroots support from the communities. They do this thing called the community visit process. And this graph outlines what happens. The Vermont Council on Rural Development goes to towns and says, would you like us to come and help you identify priority action items? And this process involves inviting 24 experts from all over the state to come into your town and listen to you. That's all they do. And VCRD runs a program where they then they find a way to get you to rally around common themes throughout this community visit process. It's like a 2 or 3 month process. Hundreds of people come and interact, and they prioritize community and economic development issues. Local people do this. And through these processes, I've been on about a dozen, probably 24 of these visits. Tonight, I'm actually going to Brownington to do one of these visits. That'll be a fun drive back at midnight or so. But 3 great examples of projects that come out of these community visit processes at Hardwick. They're in year 7 trying to expand their library. Like 2 or 3 bond votes failed, but this community visit process brought about 24 people together that care greatly about their library and have persevered and worked with their local government and worked with the federal government to find money. In fact, they got an earmark to finish the $2.5 million budget, as well as a $1.6 or $1.5 million bond vote to cover it all. But the pandemic hit, building costs rose. But they're on the precipice of doing a doubling of their library thanks to this community visit process. The federal government didn't come up with that and didn't act. The state government did, and it was locals. In Craftsbury, a group of young people through the community visit process band together. They didn't know each other. They come together and they say, we need childcare. They built a childcare center in Craftsbury, Vermont, because of the community visit process. Local, all politics are local. And then Guilford, which is actually Algiers, which is a great story. They call it Algiers because there was a poker game there 100 years ago. And the people from Brattleboro would talk about the pirates of Algiers in Guilford because they cheated and they stole their money. And the Guilford Grange Hall. And they redid the Guilford Grange Hall, which is a vacant building that turned into a childcare, a senior center, and a business incubator in Little Guilford, Vermont. It's a great story. We're in Algiers. I was wrong. I have 2 more slides. So my other example of how all politics are local is the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston's Working Communities Challenge, which is operating in 8 communities in Vermont, 8 towns, 8 regions in Vermont. About it's been 10 years now. Thomas Friedman, prolific author, writes this piece and writes a book. And writes this piece in the New York Times about Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And he was looking at why Lancaster, Pennsylvania was thriving. A rural community of, I'm forgetting how many, it's probably 50 or 60,000. I'm making that up. Is thriving when so many other rural communities are dying. And he looks through and says, is it because of geographic location? Is it because of some business mix? He said, no. It's because there's a group of locals, including some city councilors, but more importantly, some business leaders. I guess you'd call it a room like this, like Rotary, that have been coming together for decades to talk about their community and act in their community. And this complex adaptive coalition, which operates outside of local government, actually, has made Lancaster boom when other places are dying. It's a great article, Thomas Friedman, Lancaster. You'll find it if you Google it. The Working Communities Challenge down in southern New England did a similar study and proved that point, that industry mix, geography, none of this stuff matters. It's if you have a group of people working together on a systems change beyond that transcend political, I shouldn't use that word, transcend term limits, transcend the local kind of tribal mentality, you can get something special done. And so they launched this Working Communities Challenge in, I don't have the slide. That's too bad. In those communities you saw on the left, in places like Barrie, the Greater Barrier Area, they've come together, and this is a great trick of the Working Communities Challenge program. They fund technical assistance in that community. They came together to say, we want to reduce the number of single household families, single parent household families that are in poverty. So over the next 5 years, we're going to do systems change, bring in collaborators from private sector, public sector, and the practitioners can solve this problem. The dirty secret of the working community's challenges, we didn't care what they say we, because I'm on the steering committee for that, we didn't care what their challenge was. It was a ruse to get them to work together to solve the problem. Because all of this research shows if you get people in the same room working together to solve a problem, they will identify the expert after they've done the first problem, which is an insane concept. So in places like Southern Vermont, they're working on increasing the number of immigrant families. In places like Northwestern Vermont, they're working on housing. In the Northeast Kingdom, they're working on reducing the number of people living in poverty. I think I have overstayed my welcome, so I will come back to, I should have put all politics are local here. That my 20 years in federal, state, and local government shows me that the political machine actually works. And that by spinning the wheels of the federal funding and the policy at the federal level, spinning the wheels of the state policy, spinning the wheels, you'll notice which one's the biggest, the local action wheel. You can actually change the world and address issues. And when you look at a place like Williston, I'm not as familiar with Richmond, but we're solving climate change with the decision to put on an energy coordinator and build solar panels, preserving the Catamount Forest. We're solving the housing issue like no other community in Vermont. Anytime you go into a room where people talk about housing, you should hit your fist on the table and say, Williston is doing its part and we're not done. We're actually acting to help solve the housing challenge. When you look at incivility, look at the way our select board has worked, look at the way our school board has worked. There's something magical about this community and we should be really proud of it. So thank you for the time. Thanks for putting up with me. And I'm going to stop my share. Thanks, everyone. All right, yeah.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Ted. I'm bullish on rules. One of the things that has come up in my work with Vermont Action is in talking to the Office of Racial Equity, Susanna Davis and her team, they've come up with it's called the Ideal program, and I understand that VLCT has something to do with helping them to get the word out to municipalities and stuff. I wonder if you could say a little something about what that is.
Absolutely. So let's talk about racial equity for a second. Who's not solving racial equity problems for us? The state, the federal government. You go down that long list. The people that can solve this problem are at the local level. And so about 2 years ago, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, actually it was about a year and a half ago, was really challenged by some of our members and our board members and said our towns are struggling with this issue. Only the most advanced towns have any idea what the first step is they should take, never mind how they should solve racial equity issues in their community. So we just started a equity committee about a year ago. We're building an equity plan that would build a toolkit for communities to say, this is how you form an equity committee. This is what your equity committee should start working on. These are the people you should consider calling and saying, hey, we need help navigating the equity process. These are the tools you can use, like an equity assessment tool. But anytime you put a policy in place as a municipality, whether it be, I'm not kidding, should we run a speed trap on Williston Road this weekend? Well, if you're running speed traps in a neighborhood that's predominantly people of color, guess what you're going to do more often than not? Pull over people of color. So running everything from that to a program of we're going to build a new road somewhere. Well, what are we building that road? But what's the impact on racial equity? We're going to hold hybrid meetings. Every policy really needs to be evaluated to say, is this best in being a welcome and inclusive place? In our experience as communities, simply have none of that experience. A 3-person select board, with a budget of $150,000 a year, aside from the roads, can't solve this. So Debbie mentioned the Ideal program. So the league is working on this. We're working in partnership with the Vermont Community Foundation and the Office of Racial Equity, Susanna Davis's office. The Ideal program, I don't remember what it stands for, is a $250,000 or so program that would bring municipalities together and build a cohort of municipalities to address racial equity together and do some shared learning. And then also bring this cohort of municipalities access to those in state government with the expertise. So did you know that the Department of Transportation has a racial equity and civil rights director. The school board association has a director of racial equity that's providing services to all of the equity services across equity directors and people whose job it is across the state. IDEA will connect those people and build bridges. It's a really interesting program. Was that the right approach, or do you have something else?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I know that Richmond, I was just talking yesterday with, they have a racial equity group, and of course, Williston does too, separate from the national town government. Yeah, so I'm gonna send them warning you.
One of our goals is to network all of the racial equity committees together. Sure.
I have a question for you regarding housing. We're talking about affordable housing. One of the things that I've seen everybody here has, the cost for housing has gone through the roof. People are paying $50,000 more than the asking price, so it's all bidding wars and everything. My concern is what's going to happen when things are reevaluated, because I see the new housing going up. Some of it is starting at $800,000. Most of us couldn't afford to buy our house right now. We did that. So how are the towns going to deal with that? I can't believe that it's going to keep going, and pretty soon it'll be $1 million for some dinky little house. Are they thinking about that, and how do you address the fact that it seems so lopsided at this point that we could end up paying for $800,000 worth of tax revenues when our houses really aren't worth that? And they never go backwards.
Yeah.
They never go backwards and say, oh, that was just a blip along the way. We're back here. I'm just wondering, with your location, so that you're looking at everybody, is that something people are talking about, and how they're going to deal with it?
They absolutely are talking about it. Actually, the legislature is giving towns a little more money to update their, to help their listers update their programs. And the weird calculation of when you have to do a reassessment and when the CLA triggers and all this wonderful stuff, it's going to happen to a lot of communities, and we're going to be in a state where everybody has to do reappraisals. And I just talked to reassessments. I just talked to Nemrick, which most towns in Vermont use to do their reassessments. Like, I'm booked out till 2026 today. So we don't have enough listers and appraisers to do this work. But I think the reality is, no matter what happens there, your property taxes generally don't go up through that reassessment unless your property is vastly different than what it used to be in proportion to other properties. So our observation is this is going to be an exercise in governance that doesn't result in increased property taxes largely. I say that and we look at what happened in Burlington. It call BS on me. That's certain. But we are hearing it from towns. They're worried about it. I don't really have a good answer for it, other than towns are very aware of it and focused on how do we have the resources, how do we get the people to do these, what's it going to mean for our taxpayers?
Even like the hospitals thinking of building housing because they can't attract people because of the cost of housing. And after COVID, everybody wants to move.
I mean, look at Williston, right? You can build an endless supply of $2,500 a month apartments in Williston, and they will fill, which is a crazy thought. You can build an endless supply of $800,000 houses now, will sell, which is a crazy thought. I mean, I think the solution. So if you look at what's happening in Montpelier right now, there is going to be it's about a 5x increase in the amount of federal and state resources to build affordable housing in the next year through the federal stimulus program, the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act money, and the Coronavirus Relief Act money. All the money in the world, is not going to solve this problem until regulations and rules change. There's a fight about whether or not you should be able to build more than 10 units of housing in designated downtowns without going through redundant permit processing, Act 250 process. Those are the kind of things that need to change. There's a debate down in Montpelier right now about whether we should change the review process in Act 250 to go away from the environmental court, go to a political body decide all these crazy things that are happening that go backwards. need to reduce regulation on housing in places where you want growth, like we have in Williston. And it's been a sacrifice, right? People are not happy about that sometimes, but it has really aided in meeting the needs. And unfortunately, in a state where we need something like 15,000 units of housing, and we're building, a couple hundred to 1,000 units a year, we're in a bit of a problem.
I think we're planning for one more. And I'm sorry, Sally, I happen to see.
I can do a lightning round too. Pick one.
The word affordable needs to be defined. Because I mean, you're still talking $800,000 or, so where there's just this delineation in definition of the word affordable.
Thanks for your comment.
So that people don't pay more than 30% of their income on their house.
Ted, can you speak around so people can maybe buzz by and ask you questions?
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ted, for a great talk this morning. And on behalf of Williston-Richmond Rotary Club, making a donation to the Williston Central School Mentoring Program in your name for being our speaker this morning. So thanks again.
Thank you. I think let's do the raffle drawing while Ted is here. We'll have him draw. Would you mind? Sorry, I didn't realize it. I was gonna try to get usually I try to do that.
Are you reading it or am I?
You please, the last three numbers.
Lucky ticket number 152. 152.
Okay, does anyone have any announcements?
Yes.
Come right on
I'm
up.
gonna be quick. Anna Bilatti's street store is this Sunday afternoon, 2 to 6. I had asked earlier who had tents or canopies that we could borrow, and I had a show of hands, but I didn't get names. Yes, me. I've got one you can borrow. Okay, Chris. Yep. Tell me where to bring. No. Anyone else? I have one I'll put on here. We need one more. Okay, well, let's see if I can hunt one down.
I might.
Oh, okay.
I'll check.
My garage.
Where do you want those? Can I bring mine to you? Yeah, would you do that? Yeah. When do you need them? I
Sunday.
need them Sunday afternoon. I can pick them up. Saturday. Cool, man. I'll be in touch. Okay. I'll put you down. Okay, the other thing I need 4 volunteers at 1 o'clock Sunday afternoon to help set up tables and canopies. I'm looking for 4 people.
Is it gonna rain?
Sorry, wrong time in Vermont, the answer is yes.
It's just
Put me on, yes.
May 1st.
Wait till Sunday. Chris Stewart,
Chris, thank you, Chris.
okay.
So bring your tent with you.
Okay, so put Phil down with a question mark.
Okay,
Okay, one more.
I put myself. I need 4 at 5:45 to tear down and pack up and go away.
You can put me down.
We have 4 different people.
And something. What's the event again?
It's a street store that is being organized by Anna Bilotti, the intern with the Community Justice Center.
Okay.
Which is a free clothing store for people in need.
Nice.
So if anybody has clothing as well that they need to get rid of, so adults and children clothing.
Need 2 more? Or tear down? This is going to be at the Ignite Church on South Brownell Road. It used to be Church of.
So do you bring the clothing there?
You can
Where do you bring the clothing if you want to donate clothing?
bring it to our office. And I can give you that.
Your office?
Yes,
South Brown
1544.
just down the street from that church,
I'll ask you your address.
Perfect.
right over the bridge. Okay, so I'm a little light on volunteers. Anna was also hoping to get a few people to help sort clothes also.
I can hang out for the first hour or so after we set this stuff up. So I'm good at that. I'm good at that.
Okay, so that's pretty much it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. And everybody that is helping us with it in any way, thank you. It's a great project that she's doing and maybe will become an annual event. It's nice to
And if you
support.
didn't volunteer, it's okay to show up unannounced.
That's true. We don't mind a bit. Have you received any word from anybody about businesses they're signing up for?
I don't have amounts yet. My vision. When I figured something, it looks like finally get something from Healthy Living. Or Well, that's how I call it. So I'm still waiting on a few things that are out there. But that's all I've heard about. I haven't heard anything else.
Okay, so no members have said to you, put my name down for this. Okay, so at last count, we had 50 businesses that need to be contacted for our fundraiser. So please, if you haven't signed up for a business, please, if you have questions, talk to me about it, talk to Marty about it. But get a hold of Marty and let him know what businesses you could contact. It's, you know, it's not something people like to do, but it's simply asking. And this group does a lot for the community. So it's not asking a lot of people to kick in some donation.
The hard part, you haven't done much, is always finding the right person. That's hard.
So I would like to offer a challenge to all of us. Next week is our business meeting. Next week is our business meeting. Let's have no more than 10 blank spots on our list of businesses. So that means 40 businesses. Some people in our group sign up for. Thank you for that. And then Green Up Day is on Saturday, May 7th. We've signed up for, we did sign up for the school, but then the school one that we've seen kicks in. So we are going to do Walker Hill Road and we will have the bags and I'll be getting more information to all of you about that. But is there anybody who knows for sure that they want to do that? What time? It's starting at 8.
So it's gonna rain.
Bring umbrellas without a doubt. Dress for everything. I'll be sending all of that out. We could meet at our office at Walker Hill, but I'll be sending that out. So I just need a show of hands of people who would be interested in helping pick up trash.
I'm already signed up at the town every year. Andrew.
Okay, but they're signed, you're signed up for a different group. What's that? Oh, right. And you're signed up
My wife.
So who else? I know Armand, you're doing it. I'm doing it. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Leslie, FYI, I drive up and down that road every day. It's gonna take you about 15 minutes.
I happen to notice, yeah, somebody's already been out there.
Yeah, it's pretty clean.
So we can wander over.
We can always, yeah, there just happen to be a couple of roads adjacent to
Brownell
that.
Road on the other side, pretty bad.
Yes. So anybody else want to sign up for Green Up Day? Armand, Leslie, Elizabeth, Barbara, Sherry, if it doesn't rain. Right?
I bought a new raincoat after the last time.
And boots. Okay, that's all I have for announcements. Anybody else?
You provide the trash bags or whatever.
Trash bags, gloves,
I don't want to have a grabber, so if you have a grabber, bring it.
And your raincoat.
And make a raincoat, your rubber.
Okay, does anybody need something immediately?
I actually have to run.
Okay, then you can share first if you would like.
Are we sharing celebrations
You
or?
can share anything you're desired.
Well, I just want to say that it's great to see everybody and meet some new people. And appreciate you all being here tonight. And there's food. There's some good handy takeaway food, fruit, yogurts on your way out. Sorry, I have to leave.
Yes, and I told Greg we have to check our budget, but we think we still have some money for you to buy books.
We have money for you.
We will do our best to spend it.
Thank you. Okay, Howard?
Please express our sincere thanks for the breakfast.
Right.
Excellent.
Great.
I'm sorry.
thank you to our speaker. That was great talk. And I was just going to throw out last month's Rotarian